Guerry Wade is a graduate of Cal State LA with his master's in physics. He spent a number of years working for Hughes Aircraft in advanced manufacturing technology before leaving to go into private practice as doing technology, health technology, including Rife technology, which you may or may not be familiar with, but Rife technology is actually the frequency, finding the oscillating frequency, the harmonic frequency for viruses that can kill them in your body, and he may mention that tonight. But the most interesting thing about him is that he's had a number of personal experiences throughout the years, in fact, quite a number of them, that he'll be talking about tonight with both these craft and the actual extraterrestrials. He just has a wealth of information and has been speaking at a number of different venues, and he lives right here locally up in the North Valley area, and we would like to welcome tonight with a warm MUFON Orange County welcome, Guerry Wade. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is the volume good? Okay. 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 Hi. Well, I'm going to talk to you tonight about my personal experiences over the years, close encounters with various extraterrestrial craft, you know, flying saucers, UFOs, and no doubt in my mind what they are because I saw them up so close and personal. Well, there's no doubt, there's no questioning, is that really from here or not from here? No, it's not from here. I also want to talk to you about things that have been, in a sense, done to me and that are happened to me that I believe are associated with my experiences with extraterrestrials. I have no conscious memory of ever being abducted, but I have no doubts that I've been abducted, and members of my family, and certain friends. I've also met aliens, didn't know it at the time, but realized it after a bit. So what I'm going to do here is just go through like a linear litany of my experiences. I'll digress now and then with side stories, and then we'll backtrack a little bit to fill in things. I can't do everything all at one shot because it wouldn't make sense to you unless you see a bigger picture. I encountered my first flying saucer, a UFO, when I was 4.5 years old. I hadn't heard about them yet. I was living out on a farm, a ranch in a small town of Planada up in the San Joaquin Valley. And my mother took me in town one day to visit with a friend of hers who was living in a old Victorian house that had been turned into a boarding house. And this lady was renting a room upstairs in the back. So my mom takes me upstairs with her, and we knock on the door, and the lady answers. They chat a bit. And the rules are that if you have guests at the boarding house, you've got to go down to the parlor and entertain your guests there. Well, they wanted to do adult talk and didn't want big ears with them. So they put me in the room and said, be good, don't mess nothing, you know, we'll be back. And they left me. Well, as soon as they left the room, head for the parlor, I noticed that the back window of this room overlooking this alleyway was open. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. There's a second story. I haven't been up there so high before. So I immediately went to the window and hoisted myself up onto the window sill, and I was balancing myself outside the window, thinking, isn't this neat? Well, about that time, to my left, something was coming down the alleyway. And I look over and thinking, what is that? I haven't seen one of those before. Well, what it was a disc flying on its edge, coming down the alleyway at about maybe 10 miles an hour, I'd guesstimate, if that. And the disc was slowly rotating. It's in the air, and it had a dome on it. The thing was about 15 feet in diameter, and it came right in front of me, like right there. It was front row distance from me, actually a little closer. The dome itself was stationary, but the disc was rotating. And I can tell you, I got such a good look at it, I thought, they ought to wash that thing. It was dirty. It was dingy and whatnot. And it had a haze, sort of like a fog, but it wasn't fog. It was like I don't want to say it's like a grayness around the edge, all the way around it, and it stood off the hull for about a foot or so in from the edge. Now, in hindsight, after I know now, it's some part of the propulsion system, but at the time I thought, that's kind of weird. So the thing just came by me like about that rate, and I watched it go away, didn't make a sound, thought no more of it, went on about my business. Didn't even mention it to my mom, because, you know, nobody had told me about these things. And when you're 4½, you know, everything's kind of new, particularly when you go to town, and I hadn't been to town much. So, now I'm going to fast forward ahead to 1952. Well, I was 7 then, and my parents would go in town, usually on the weekend, to shop, buy supplies, food, do what they do. And they'd drop by the theater, Merced Theater, and drop me off there and say, you know, go see the matinee and Rocket Man or whatever was playing and the cartoons. And I just loved it. It was great for me. Well, this particular weekend, I get in there and I go down front row center and I'm looking up at the big screen. And as usual, they got the newsreel, you know, RKO in those days. They showed that guy with the cranking cameras, they'd start the newsreel. Well, this was quite a newsreel, because in this first thing up in the newsreel was the story about the 5 UFOs hovering over the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And this RKO reporter is interviewing a Navy admiral and an Air Force general about them. And they're back a distance from the Capitol building. It's like, looks to be, you know, let's say a couple, 3 blocks away, and they're up one of the monuments, you know, looking into the Capitol. And the camera guy is panning up and seeing the 5 objects that are a couple, 3,000 feet above the Capitol building just sitting there. And so the RKO reporter puts the mic up to the admiral and says, "What do you think they are?" And the admiral says, "They don't show up on our radar." Okay, and he says, "Well, what do you think they are?" "They don't show up on our radar." Oh. Goes over to the general and says, "What do you think they are?" Now this is funny. The general gets this real big shit grin on his face. And he says, "Our radar is working fine and we can see them." "What do you think they are?" "Our radar is working fine and we can see them." That's it. Can't get any more out of these guys. They pan back up, look at it again, and then they leave that clip. Well, at that point there, I realized what I had seen as a kid. That's them. You know, they're here. These are aliens. And so I would argue that disclosure was made in 1952, and we refused it. Because here, I'm a kid in the movie theater looking at an RKO newsreel, and they're telling you, look, what do you think they are? They don't show up on our radar. So we knew, we were told, and we didn't go for it. Oh no, I'm sorry, they don't show up on our radar, we don't see that. So disclosure was made, and we just kind of, I guess, ignored it. Well, I'm going to fast forward now again. That was 52. Let's move on to about 1956. Around I was 11 then. And much more worldwide, living in the big city now of Merced. Anyway, I was coming home this summer evening about 10:30 at night, about a block from home, and I was crossing the street and absolutely no traffic. You know, town is dead. But you know how you're trained to, you go out in the street, look to the left, make sure nothing's going to run you down. So I'm out in the street looking to the left, nothing's going to run me down, but I noticed this very bright light way down there at the horizon, but it's unusual. And as I'm staring at it, thinking, boy, it's an unusual bright light way down here on the horizon, the thing goes, zzz, except it had no noise, it was quiet. That's just for drama. And as it went by, you know, it was just a white glow that was really moving and went from horizon to horizon about as fast as I could follow it. And I thought to myself, well, that's not from here. Because I knew enough about jets and everything else at that time. I knew that was them again, but so what? What are you going to do? They're gone. So I went on home and didn't think about it anymore. And that was in 56. So it was kind of nothing much going on for quite some time in terms of any sightings, but I did an awful lot of reading of articles and books and stuff on UFO stuff and thought a lot about them, but no sightings. And then in 1967, I came home from working in the cannery in the summer. Came home from work one afternoon, and my mother says to me, "Did you see the article last week in the Merced Sun-Star about the sighting of the UFO up at Coulterville?" Which is a town up in the mountains about, I guess, 50 miles away or so as the crow flies. I said, "No." He says, "Oh yeah, look, read it, here it is." So I read this article and got all excited. I said, "Oh boy, this is, I gotta go talk to these people. You know, they're nearby, they've seen one. I can I can go up and interrogate them. So I immediately showered, ate dinner quickly, packed my saddlebags and put them on my motorcycle and headed out of town. Well, I was about 2/3 of the way to this place called Coulterville, and I was coming down this mountain grade, a nice straight long grade, into this upper little mountain valley, the upper part of this valley. And as I hit the flat and straightened out and going level straight, I noticed something in my vision out to the right, and I looked out and I couldn't believe my eyes. There were these two metallic, identical, football-shaped, ellipsoid-looking things that were orbiting each other's center of mass over this large oak tree across this upper valley. And so I slowed way down, like 10 miles an hour, whatever it was, 15. I got goose flesh on my arms, and the word wow kept being recycled through my mind. And I thought, you know, this is them. There they are right there. I mean, I recognize aliens and their craft. So I kept going down this road slowly while staring at them, and until I got to the point where the road made a right angle turn to go away from them. That was the closest approach to these guys. So I stopped my motorcycle there and got off, took off my helmet, and now they were just a little over maybe 1/8 of a mile from me. I mean, they're really close. And I thought, oh, this is such an opportunity. I got to talk to these guys. I got questions. I want to know where you're from, how you got here, how you run your world. You know, how does that thing fly? I wanted to know all this stuff about them. So I decided I was going to go over and try to get them to land. So I was real familiar with all this road because I always, on the weekend, as they used to always say, you can't find me at the house, he's in the mountains on his motorcycle. So I knew this road very well. And right there where the road does a right angle turn and heads away is a dirt road that goes over just a few feet, just a little bit further outside of this door distance, to a cattle guard, which is a break in a cow fence. You go over the cattle guard and the road makes a right angle turn and heads back that way to where they're at. So I thought, I'll just simply go on the road, cross over and drive up to where they're at, park my bike and wave them on down. Well, so I got on my motorcycle to do that. To my utter surprise, the road wasn't there. The cattle guard wasn't there. None of my memory of what was supposed to be right there that I was very familiar with. I mean, it's the road to Merced Falls. Everyone knows that. Where is it? So I'm going, okay, I'm just very excited, and somehow I'm misremembering. That's what I told myself. Well, we were in sort of like a little rolling foothills there on the edge of this valley. So I said, the road must be just slightly down. I'm misremembering it a bit. So I go down the road about 150, 200 yards, just over this little rise and drop down again. And again, there's no road, but there is a turnout. So I turn out at this turnout, and I have a conversation with myself about what happened to reality. You know, I know there's a road there. I've been on it. I know the roads very well. But where is it? I mean, roads just don't disappear. So I kind of came to the conclusion that somehow they didn't want me to come over and see them. So I decided to head on to Coulterville. So I did. So I get to Coulterville, which is a small town of about 250-ish people. And I go to the combination bar, restaurant, museum, hotel. And there's a bunch, it's a local gathering place because it's the old place. And I sort of asked people about, Vicky Haig and Mavis Knight, the ladies that were in the article I just got through reading about the sighting that had happened the week before. And I was informed that, unfortunately, Vicky Haig's grandfather was deathly ill. Actually, he died, I think, the next day, I was told. So it was not a good time to go visit with the family and ask them about UFOs and stuff. So I understood that. So instead, I did I polled the audience, which of you have seen, UFOs? Which of you believe in them? I did a whole survey of this group of people that were here, and they were kind of, And it was kind of interesting, though, because I found about 1/3 of them had seen and believed in them, and the other third were firmly neutral, had no opinion, and the others, oh, they're crazy. So I did that for a bit, and then I said, well, I'm going to go make camp somewhere and sleep because I was real tired. So I went over to the local park and started to set up where I'm going to spend the night in my bag, and all these people started showing up in the park and saying, what's going on? He says, oh, so-and-so, the favorite couple of the town, been married for 50 years, and this is their golden or something anniversary, and the whole town's turning out for it. And I got, oh, great. No sleep now. So I said, okay to myself, I said, well, I'll just pack up my stuff and I'll get on my motorcycle and I'll just head 7 miles up the road to a town called Greeley Hill and Hilltop. So that's what I did, because they have a nice campground up at Hilltop. So a little while later, I'm cruising into Greeley Hill and then up to Hilltop, and it's dark now. And I turn off the road, the paved road, into the dirt road heading into the campground at Hilltop. I no sooner get on the road, like from here to that curtain over there, and there's a car coming out like a bat out of hell. Actually, it was a station wagon. I mean, this guy had it floored. And I had no choice but to drive off the dirt road, otherwise I would have been ran down by this guy. And he didn't slow down. He didn't make a horn. He just, and I was off in the dirt, and I was left in the rolling, what do they call it, pine dust. You've never been in the forest, you know how that really unbelievably fine, ugly pine dust is. I was just choking it, and I was saying all kinds of nasty things about this guy. And so anyway, that passed. And I got back on my bike on the road, and I went in, putting into the campground. And this campground was really quite a nice campground, because the community down below had adopted it for themselves, even though it was a forestry campground, and had improved it for themselves. As a matter of fact, they were notorious for ripping off they would tear down the forestry camp sign so that people couldn't find it, because they wanted it kept nice for them. They had laid a nice big concrete slab up there, a square dancing floor. They'd brought in a really high-end wood-burning stove that you could actually bake in. They had strung those swimming pool type lights around the trees, you know, with a big switch on a box. You could light the whole place up and have a great social up there. It was really quite a nice place. And it only had like half a dozen, maybe 8 campsites at most. It was a small, compact campground. So I got in there, and the lights were on, and there was this raging fire. The fire is almost as high as the ceiling here out of this one fire pit. I mean, just choked. And this thing was just roaring. This is summertime. This is a real bad idea, because it's a great way to have a forest fire. So all the lights are on. There's roaring fire, and no one's there. And I thought, well, this is that same damn idiot that just about killed me. So I got in there, and very quickly I got some water and brought that fire down to a gentle roar so we wouldn't have a forest fire. And then I just played with the fire for a while. You know how it mellows you out, you know. It's not so bad. It's all right. So at about 20 minutes, I was pretty mellow. And I say, okay, it's time for rest. So I doused the fire, and I put my mummy bag down, and I get all ready, and I turn out the lights, and I go to bed. No sooner am I just cozying in, and this car drives in. And I go, oh, no, well, it's a campground. And they drive in right where I'm at. They don't know I'm here, because my motorcycle has a broken kickstand, so I lean it up against this really big tree. So it's just out of sight. And they drive in right by it, not seeing it. And so, gosh, they're just about where that table is from me, that distance. But they're pointing out away from me in this parking stall. And it's a sad situation. I won't bore you with the details, but it is an interesting story. The woman's crying, the guy's trying to console her, and it's going on, and I'm going, oh boy. And I think I better make some noise, because let them know I'm here. But then again, maybe they'll leave. Well, I don't have to make that decision, it turns out, because then suddenly another car shows up, and it pulls in right behind them. And out comes Constable Abbott, local law enforcement. And he's all excited. He's got a big flashlight, and he goes up to the window, and he shines in and says, who are you, and what are you doing here, to them. And they start telling him the story. And he says, no, I don't want to know about that. He said, have you heard or seen anything strange? It's a great question. And they said, no. And at that time, I decided it was time to speak up. I said, and they all like, what? Who are you? And shines the light on me. The young couple is very embarrassed that they realize that I've been listening to their problems. Abbott is kind of going like, who in the hell are you, and why are you sleeping basically under a picnic table in the campground, And I explained to him, no, don't shoot. There's a motorcycle over here, it's mine, and I'm on my mummy bag here, it gives me shelter, and, and I'm just spending the night. Okay, he says, have you heard or seen anything strange? And I said, well, the only thing strange was the guy that almost killed me when I drove in here. He drove me off the road, and he was insane, and he left a roaring fire in a fire pit and all the lights on. And he says, that must have been the guy that called. He said it was his civic duty on his way out of the county to call and warn people about the thing in the campground. And he says, he had to be some greenhorn, city guy. Some bear scared him and his family. That's all Abbott thought. It had to be a bear. And so Abbott says, well, everybody have a good night. And he just get in his car and went home. And the young couple, they got out of there too because they were embarrassed, and they just left me there. I'm going, okay, it's all right. So I'm laying down, going to sleep. And no sooner than I start to just get mellow, and I hear it. Crunch. 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 Methodical crunch, crunch. You got the idea. But it's not close by. It's not threatening. It may be as far as 100 yards out in the forest. Crunch. But it's big, whatever it is. Boy, is it crunching, a lot of crunch. And, and then it stops over that way, and it starts moving this way, and then it comes back again, crunch, 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 crunch. You got the idea. I can go on, but that's what keeps happening. Each pass, it works its way in, 5 or 10 yards from whatever it was, and I'm saying this is a trend I'm not liking. And then it gets real quiet. And then I hear this ripping, tearing noise, and like a big limb is falling through the canopy in a forest and crashes in the forest floor. I'm going, holy crap, got my full attention. And then crunch, crunch, crunch. And then a big thing again, down to the forest floor. This limb, I'm going, holy, and I'm up now. I mean, we got to find out, what is this? And it keeps walking. Now it's down to maybe, I don't know, pick a number. You can't tell, it's all dark. It's like a no moon night, and I'm in a forest, so it's like, and I don't want to get up yet and go to the light and go try to find the light switch. But I was getting that point. So the thing's coming now, and it's really quite close. And now it goes off to the side of me out over here. And it's got my full attention. I think it's only like maybe 30 yards out. Do you folks know what manzanita is, or ironwood? Yeah. Okay. Well, this area was in that transition, forest with ironwood and manzanita. Well, wherever this thing was, it starts taking out the manzanita patch. You can hear it shattering and ripping, and not only on top of that, it's screeching. I'd make you all go insane if I tried to really repeat what I heard. How many of you here remember the picture Forbidden Planet? Oh, good. Do you remember the monster of the It or the monster of the Krell? Yeah. Okay, that's what this thing sounded like. That creation that was basic, what was it in the movie? It basically looked like a cross between a tiger, a lion, and a sloth, and and it was like 12 feet wide, 10 feet tall, or something. This monstrous thing. That's what this thing was like in my mind. Well, I'm really getting excited now, and I'm looking for anything I can fight with. And I got this, biggest thing I've got is this real heavy crescent wrench, about a little over a foot long. That's my weapon. So you go with what you got. So I jump up out of my bag, and I'm heading for the light switch, and this thing is coming for me. It's very unhappy. And I figure I'm going to be eaten any moment. I'm just hoping I get a good look at it before he devours me. And I make it to the light switch, and I turn on the light switch, and it goes stone quiet. Absolutely stone quiet. There's nothing there. No dust, no nothing, no noise. It's just stone quiet. And I'm sitting there in adrenaline shock, with a wrench in my hand. Well, where is it? So I stood there for quite some time at that light switch. I'm not sure how long, 5-10 minutes. And now this is where it gets kind of screwy, because this proves that you can have totally irrational thinking, and it doesn't seem so at the time. Somehow I convinced myself everything's fine now. It's gone, whatever it was, it's no longer a problem. You can go lay back down again. I mean, that's, in hindsight, that's total stupidity. But that's somehow what I told myself, or something told me to tell myself that. That's what I see now in hindsight many years later. So anyway, I turn the lights out, I go back to bed. Back to my mummy bag. Okay, I'm just about my mummy bag, and I'm settling down. And all of a sudden, it's back. And it's on the other side of the picnic table from me. And it's going, and I can hear it running its claws through the ground and ripping out the tree roots. At least that's what I think I'm hearing. That's what I interpret as, this hideous screaming and this ripping and roughing up of the ground, and it's really a bizarre thing. And I'm going, holy crap, and I'm up again to the light switch. And again, I turn on the lights. No dust, no commotion, no nothing. stone quiet. Okay, I've had enough now, I'm leaving. So I very quickly pack up my stuff, and very quickly I might add, and I'm on my motorcycle, and I'm a bit tense. I'm sort of like in an adrenaline overrun. And I'm running straight pipe on my motorcycle, like a scavenger. And I crank it, and that starts on the first crank because I was rather intense. I was so intense that when I cranked the gas with my pump, you know, on the pedal, I ripped out my gas cable. I just, you know, I overdid it, shall we say. And so there I was with my motorcycle on full bore scavenger pipe, and I was really not in a good mood. I was just like I say, an adrenaline overrun. And you get kind of crazy and you go reptilian brain. All I could think was kill the motorcycle. And so I did. I got off my motorcycle and I grabbed it by its engine and I thrashed it to death. What I ended up happening actually was that my arm muscle went over the intake of the carburetor and choked it to death and killed it. And I laid it to rest. Anyway, I was really bonkers. I was about ready to run off through the forest going boo. And I was saved because a car came into the campground with 4 high school kids from Sonora. Never happier to see 4 high school kids in Sonora in my life. And they were up there to party. And I went over to them and explained to them they couldn't stay, that there was this thing in the campground. You don't want to be here, but you don't leave until I'm ready to go too, please. So I did the fastest repair job on my motorcycle I'd ever done. And I got out of there and left them behind to figure out if there was something in there or not. They didn't want to have anything to do with me. They looked at me as though I was kind of on the insane side, and I was. So I got out to the road, and I'm heading away, and I was just so overjoyed that I was still alive, you know. And I was rather tense still, but I started to feel this wave of relaxation come over my body. And I was in no rush about anything anymore, and I was just cruising like 30, 35 miles an hour. And it was just so lovely because I'm alive, you know. Well, I'm going down the road for about a mile, if that, before the road starts to drop into a canyon. And this canyon's got a bunch of switchbacks on the wall, you know, those S-type, you know, switchbacks, until the road finally goes out and goes over the ridge line. Well, as I'm going out, heading towards the canyon road on the flats, I notice that there's something out in the forest, lights. I really can't see it much, but I keep catching my look over, and they're cherry red lights. It's 2 or 3 of them, maybe 3, maybe not, you know, it's hard to say because the tree tops are getting in the way, and it's back in maybe a couple hundred yards, whatever. But it's got my attention, but whatever, and I'm just so happy to be alive, and I'm cruising. So I finally reach where the road heads down into the canyon, and this lights now come out, and they're following the ridge line of the canyon. And I'm going, what are those? There's 3 of them now, I can see for sure. And the cherry red, I'm thinking, it can't be a helicopter, it can't be a small plane, whatever it is. But all I can see is 3 cherry red lights. So I keep going down the switchbacks, and everyone out looking up. Yeah, they're still there, moving real slowly down the ridgeback. So finally, the road crosses the ridgeback. And I say, I got to find out what this is, because this thing is coming down the ridgeback. So I pull out there and take off my helmet. I'm looking straight up the ridgeback. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Oh my God, it's a flying saucer. It's a big one. It's like 50, 60 feet across. Are you familiar with the ones like Adamski saucers? It was that type. It had 3 solid rounded cones on the bottom that were glowing cherry red. Except actually it wasn't the cones. I was so close. I mean, do you see the ceiling here? That's how on the deck it was. It was that close to me. Didn't make a sound, just flew right over the top, and I got a really good look at it. And the glow itself was about a 6-inch glow to 8 inches on the surface, around the cone surface. Some type of plasma is what I interpret to be, but I really can't say, but that's what I saw. Didn't make a sound, just flew over me and just kept on going. And as a side note, I might add that that was at 11:30 at night. I found out a couple years later, and I was talking to my mom that very same night, she'd had a fight with my stepdad, a really bad one apparently, and she decided to cool off. She got in the car and went driving on a back lake road out to a place called Hornitas. And at 2:30 in the night, she saw the same craft as I described. She flew over her car. I thought, that's odd. Anyway, that was the end of that sighting that night, and I went back down into Coulterville and spent the night in the park. They were just finishing up that party. Now, the next day on my way back to Merced, I went by where I saw the first 2 ellipsoidal objects, and I'm happy to report that the road's back and the cattle guard back and all is right with the world. Now, that was a real lesson for me. It was the first time I realized that some of them had the power to override all of your realities. They give you another reality to work with, and you can't tell the difference. So you act on what you believe and you perceive. And what I believed and perceived was that road was no longer there, the cattle guard was no longer there, therefore it wasn't there. It didn't exist. But it did. But it wasn't there in my mind. And that's scary when you think about it, because if they can do that to you, they can do most anything else they want to you. So you better hope that they're benevolent, or at least they're, nice pranksters. They're not trying to kill you, because they could easily show you wonderful roads that would turn out to be a bridge abutment. But anyway, that's what happened. Well, I get back to Merced, and the following weekend, I run into an old friend of mine from college who's back home from his university for the summer. And we catch up on, what have you been doing? And I told him about my UFO experience up in the previous weekend. He said, oh, wow, we got to do something. So we decided to go look for flying saucers. And he had a little Ford Cortina. So we went and threw together a rapid camping trip and hit the stores and got provisions, and off we went to the mountains. So about 10 o'clock that night, we reached Coulterville again. And we stopped by a Dairy Queen or Foster Feast thing they had there. Just before they closed, and got ourselves a big sugar fix, and off we went to our campsite, which was a little turnout off of a dirt road to a fire lookout a few miles out of town, up in the high spot that gave you a great panoramic view. So we're unloading the stuff out of the trunk to go set up our little campsite, and I noticed this bright blue-white little star on the horizon, but I'm thinking that's way too low for a star that bright to be, because the atmosphere absorbs so much light, it just can't be a star. But so what, I just keep unloading stuff, and my next trip back to the trunk, it's moved up, it's a little brighter, and I say, it's definitely not a star, it's moved, and it's coming. Oh, well, whatever. And I take another load back. But on the third trip, I'm going, oh boy, look at that thing, that's as bright as Venus now, and it's solid, blue-white. This could be one of them. So I get my I got this really nice high-powered beam light out. So I start throwing the beam light on it, going, and thinking to myself, come on, over here, land, let's talk, And this thing is coming and coming. I'm just standing there watching, beaming, and finally it's the biggest, brightest thing in the sky, and it's a disc. You can see it's a blue-white disc now. And it's getting up like this angle here, and I'm beaming, thinking, come on now, there's a big landing right here. You can do it, And gets up about this high, and it makes a right angle turn without changing speed, and changes to a faint blue light and heads that way for a bit, and then flips back to a blue-white disc, does it again, and finally it's now going away as a disc that way, and I'm disappointed. And I suddenly receive a telepathic message from it. It says, in about 10 seconds, we're going to disappear in your vision as a streak of light. And I talked to my friend Joe. I said, Joe, they just told me in about 10 seconds they're going to disappear as a streak of light in our vision. And then it went, gone. Now, what I really found interesting about that telepathic message, it wasn't like they were exactly talking to me, because I was remembering it, and I noticed in my mind, and I thought to myself, this is really weird, because I'm sensing it as knowledge, not as someone speaking to me. I'm recording it in my mind as something that's true and already has happened, but it hasn't happened yet. And I thought, how do they do that? Still don't know, but I thought that was really kind of weird. I was experiencing it as knowledge as opposed to just a message. So anyway, these experiences, the ones I just told you, were the ones that pushed me over the edge in terms of I had to figure out what was going on in UFO phenomenon. I've been interested in it for years. I already knew I was already a physics major in college. but I decided I was going to make finding out how they work and what they were about from a technical point of view. That was what I was going to do. It's a hobby. I took it up as a hobby. Well, that was in 1967. It wasn't until about 1974. Let's see. Got myself some cheat sheet notes here of things that I've seen over the years. I was driving home. I was going to college at Cal State LA, Los Angeles, you know, where the 10 and the 710 meet now. And I was on Valley Boulevard, if you're familiar with that, where it runs into the end of the 710 freeway. And there was a signal light there, and I was sitting at the signal light like a lot of my fellow citizens, waiting for the light to change to go home. And I'm looking to the south, and at that time there was a women's prison over on the hill. I think it was called Civil Brand or something like that. And there was this brilliant blue-white oval coming out of the sky at high speed at a very steep angle. I'm going, whoa, crap, what is that? Oh, there's going to be a tremendous blast. I mean, it was just coming down out of the skies and really hauling, and it was big, and, you know, and it went behind the hill. And I was waiting for the big blast, you know, like in the movies. Nothing happened. No big blast. Went, okay, what are you going to do? No blast. So I drove on home, and I called my friend PJ, and I said, you know, I saw the damnedest thing, blah, 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 blah. And she says, well, that's interesting. So anyway, about 10 o'clock that night, I get a call back from PJ saying, turn on Channel 5. Turn on Channel 5. And they're interviewing these two police officers in the city of Bell. You know, what did you see? Well, we were at the intersection of so-and-so and so-and-so, and this giant, we don't know what it was, bigger than a city block, suddenly came down and was on top of us. And it was just, you know, all there, bright, brilliant, and stayed there for like 10, 15 seconds, and then went, you know, west towards the ocean, last we saw of it, last anybody heard of it. So thousands and thousands of people saw this thing, but you know, the only evidence is thousands and thousands of people saw it. Okay, just another one of those interesting little things. One night I was out watering my yard because it was hot, and I had to have something to do, and the yard needed water. You know, it was one of those hot summer nights. You know, you're going, oh God, can't stay in the house no more. I'm baking. So I'm up in the front yard, and I'm just, and I live on a hill, and I'm doing like this with a hose. You know. Just, you know, marking time. And in one of my passes, this thing goes, post, you know, out at the distance, but it just happens to be matching my hose spray rate. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen it. Well, as soon as I saw it, boom, 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 these just flashes of light. I knew what it was. It was a UFO flying by, and that was making plasma. Each of those flashes was it making a plasma cloud, because I'd already realized that from studying UFO stuff I had seen and movie pictures. I said, oh, I got to see one myself now. You know, and that was a sighting. Let's see, what is another one here? Okay, here's the humdinger. Now we'll fast forward now to 1979. It's spring, April, spring vacation. My last ski trip of the year for the season. It was a really good year. And there's a ski place that used to exist called Kratka Ridge. Some of you may have known of it. Some of you, no, nobody's been to Kratka Ridge. Well, too late now. Anyway, back then it was a cozy little ski place up on top of Route 2 up on the Andros Crest Highway near Waterman, if you know about Waterman ski place. Nobody know about Waterman either. Oh, there's some, okay. Anyways, a few miles further up the road. So I had a wonderful day skiing at Kratka Ridge, and I got back to my van, and I put my skis away, and I opened a Coors beer, and I was just kind of taking a slow walk. You know how you get kind of burned out, stiff, and you know, having my beer, and the sun had gone behind the local hills, though there was plenty of light, but it was getting late in the day. And as I'm walking down the road, I noticed this blue-white oval, giant one, with a contrail coming out of it, and an inner contrail inside the other contrail, a sharp cone contrail. And I realized that it's a starship, and that it's way out over the Pacific Ocean. And I also realized it was a Lemurian starship, and it was on a refueling mission. And I won't go into all the details of that, but that was my perception. I said, oh, look, there's a Lemurian starship refueling over the Pacific. And as I'm staring at it, I started to feel and perceive this high-speed whine and hum in my head. I had the sense that I was getting a big download. And then I started to perceive images. They were talking to me, and they had a lot to say. Anyway, one of the things they wanted from me is they wanted me to do them, I guess, a favor. They knew what I had been doing in the last year since 67 up until this time, 79. They knew that I had been working on UFO phenomena, trying to solve the physics and the whatnot technical aspects of UFOs. And they wanted me to take all my information and put it into a lecture format and, quote, give it to the people. That's what they wanted me to do. So I said, okay. So that was in the spring of 79. So I started working on that project, and by the fall of 79, I had the lecture ready. Now, where to give it, you know? So I looked around and got the maps out and thought about it. And there's a nice little town, maybe some of you have been there, called Idlewild, which is above Palm Springs up in the mountains. You familiar with it, a few of you? Yeah. Okay. Well, back in those days, it was about 3,000 people up there. Nice altitude, I guess it's 77,000-ish or something like that up there. And it's a nice community. And they had a nice community center. So I went up there with a couple friends of mine, PJ and Bernie, and checked it out, decided it was a good place to do it, rented the hall, put an ad in the paper, put up some flyers, and gave a UFO lecture. Well, 30-something people showed up to the lecture, and so I was just starting my lecture. And it's kind of a weird lecture hall. It had the doors in the corner, not on the wall, but right at the corner. So they opened up kind of weird, and it had these fan-shaped steps. It worked. It was a good design, I guess, but it was unusual. You don't see it like that anywhere else. And so just as I was starting my lecture, this VW bug drives up and parks right on the steps itself at the door. And everybody turns around like, don't you people know what a parking lot is? And this couple gets out with their young boy, and they come in, and my friend PJ gets up and takes their admission. These people come in, and they sit down center back of the rest of the people. And PJ then comes in and sits behind them with the mother here and the boy here and the father here. And I go on with my spiel. I've got my charts and my diagrams, and I'm trying to explain at this one point how you could actually fly in the atmosphere at supersonic speeds and not make a shock wave. And it's a trick. You know, there's ways to do it, but you know, you have to have some real technology and stuff that we don't regularly have available to us yet. We can do it in theory, but we don't have the materials and something technology to carry it out yet. But we will. So I'm explaining how you could do this sort of thing, and I just finished that, and I'm ready to move on to the next part of the lecture. Well, the little boy that came in with him, looked to be about a 12-year-old, he raises his hand and says, I didn't get that. Could you explain that again, how you do that? And I said, oh, sure. So I run through my spiel again, you know, showing the velocity and density curves and all that stuff and trying to make it, you know, understandable. And I could still see by the look in his face he's not getting it. But, you know, you just can't keep repeating stuff. So I just moved along. Okay, at that point, PJ, who's sitting behind him, here's the little boy turn to his mother and say, that's not how we do it in our ship, is it? And she says, shh. You know, and the lecture goes on. I don't know any of this at the time. So it's a long lecture. It was a 2.5-hour lecture with not counting the break. So anyway, about the middle of that, I say, hey, you know, I need a break. You need a break. Everybody's got to go to the bathroom, that sort of stuff, and stretch your legs. So we took a break. Well, during the break, this tall gentleman and his wife come up and introduce themselves to me. And it turns out he was a fighter pilot in World War II, and he was in the Polish Air Force when the Germans invaded. And when Poland fell, he flew his fighter plane to France and joined the French Air Force to fight the Germans. And when France fell, he flew his fighter plane to England and joined the British Air Force to fight the Germans. So at the end of the war, he was a full colonel. Fighter pilot, you know, squadron commander, full colonel. And they liked him. And they said, why don't you stay in? Why don't you stay in our service? And he said, okay. He says, we'd like to make you a liaison officer between the British and the American Air Forces. He says, oh, okay. So they sent him to the United States. Well, he eventually ends up at an air base over the mountains out here we call Edwards Air Force Base, except then it had another name. Where was it? Okay. Anyway, he was sent there, and he was a colonel, and he was the adjutant to the commanding general, number 2. And so he was there in 1954, and that's what he wanted to tell me about. He said in 1954, he was the adjutant at what is now Edwards Air Force Base. They got the orders to lock the base down one day. Everybody gets a gun, surround the place, nobody gets in or out, we're locked down. He said then 4 flying saucers flew in, hovered over the airstrip, and then kind of wandered onto this hangar that was prepared for them and landed in a hangar. 45 minutes later, a DC-3 lands with President Eisenhower and his people, and they taxi into the hangar and they close the hangar doors. And so Eisenhower and his people and the folks in the 4 flying saucers have this meeting all afternoon out there. Official cover story in the news is that Eisenhower wasn't playing golf at Palm Springs that day because he had a headache or a cold or something. What was it? Yeah, okay, he was having a dental appointment over at Edwards apparently. So this guy being a lowly colonel and working under a lowly general, he wasn't invited to the meeting. And so he had to wait about 3 or 4 days for the general staff, scuttlebutt, grapevine to come down and let him know what had happened. The generals talk to each other quietly. Now, you didn't hear this from me, but... So anyway, what he found out was that this was one of ongoing meetings since Roswell with these guys. And that the purpose of this particular meeting was to bring us up to speed on energy technologies. So they were there talking about, hey, you want free energy? Here's how it's done. You do this, and here's and if you get really good with your technology, then you can get this form of it. And if they got themselves an detailed briefing on basically free energy and energy technologies. Well, I thought that was rather fascinating. Anyway, I went back and finished my lecture. Now I'm going to fast forward a year ahead. I decided to do the lecture again, and I decided to go back to Idlewild and just do it all over again. It was so good the first time, let's do it again. So I go up there to rent the hall and put the ad in the paper, and I run into one of the people that had been in my first lecture, a guy named Chuck. Him and his wife Diane were there. They were cattle ranchers locally. And so we struck up a nice conversation, and one thing led to another, and he said, it's something I wanted to tell you last time at the lecture, but I didn't know how you'd handle it, so I didn't tell you. But he says, I thought it over now, and I think you can handle it, so I want to tell you what happened during the break of your lecture. I said, okay. He says, you remember that couple that came in with a young boy just as you were starting the lecture? Says, oh, yeah, we all remember them. And one of the things about this couple, and you'd have to kind of be there to believe it, as they say, to see it. These are the cleanest, neatest people I'd ever seen. Totally blemish-free. Clothes crispy, clean, sparkling. Nothing wrong with them. Perfect people. I know, I got about from here out to there from the lady, and I just looked at her and thought, my God, that woman's just, I won't say immaculate, but pristine. Well, she was, because she was a projection. He told me this was what happened during the break. He said that woman came up to me and befriended me and started small chit-chat with me. And as she was doing that, he said, I felt this high-speed wind in the middle of my head. And I felt that a large amount of information was being dumped into my mind, faster than I could ever follow it. And then he said, she started to drop her image. I said, oh? He says, yeah. What did you see? So he starts describing what he saw. And I said, wait. And we had pine dirt available to us, wonderful pine dirt. So we smoothed out a big bunch of pine dirt, and I handed him a stick, and I said, draw. And so he drew what he saw. What he saw had antennas on it, like a giant ant insect. Had giant faceted eyes like a bee. He said she dropped her image down to here, and she held it right there, didn't go any further. And he said, I think she did that because I probably couldn't have handled the mouth. You know, just think of Alien. Everybody see the movie Alien? That, you know, I don't know. He never saw it, so it's hard to say, but that's where she stopped her image. And then he said she held it there for like 10 or 15 seconds and then brought it back up, and it was just her again. And he drew a picture. And as soon as he did the picture, I said, my God, I've seen that before. There's a book out. And back in my more frivolous youth, I used to go around collecting books on UFO stuff and articles, anything I could read on it. And there's a lot of people who have had experience with the aliens, and they've been so inspired or whatever by it that they have to write about it, and they go out with their own money, they write the book, and they make these little vanity publications. You know, they print 500 or 5,000 of them, and they hoping other people will read it. Well, I was in a used bookstore. You know anybody here about the Bodie Tree out in Hollywood? You know, you're familiar with their used bookstore? Well, many, many years ago in their used bookstore, I found this book, one of these vanity books written by a guy that had encounters with these people from the ice planet Hoth. And Mr. Lucas of Star Wars fame apparently has read the same book because he used that in one of his movies. But according to this book, there are these beings that are about 2.5 billion years ahead of us, that's with a B, that are do-gooders. And they fly out around the galaxy, and they go to up-and-coming planets where people are trying to get it all together to become a single species with a single world type government and going into space, and they try to help make it a peaceful non-nuclear transition. And that's what they're doing here. And they have pictures of these beings in the book, and that's the thing that this guy drew in the sand for me, or the pine dust. So I guess that's all I want to say about that particular meeting. Now on to, let's say, 1984. What happened? Oh, yes. I was up visiting with some friends of mine that were the caretakers at a place called Cracker Ridge ski place up on Route 2, Jim and Kathy Genia. And it was a nice hot summer night, and they were bored with being at the place all the time, and we were having a couple beers and shooting the breeze, as they say. And I don't know if Kathy or somebody said, hey, let's go out to the Wilderness Overlook. Yeah, that ought to be fun. So we all jumped in the van and headed out to the Wilderness Overlook, which was about 5 miles further out. It's a great place, actually, and particularly on a full moon night, it's quite beautiful. It's got a big parking lot and all that stuff. And you can see out into the bare wilderness below, and it's just really kind of neat. So we're out there having a good time, and Jim is facing to the west, and I'm facing to the east, and we're discussing something or other. And Kathy, as I recall, has nature calls, and she's off to the outhouse. So Jim and I are just shooting the breeze there and sipping our beers, and all of a sudden, something strange happens. There's a presence, and I see it right over my head. And it's a flying saucer. And it's really kind of a strange sense of time about this saucer, too. Anyway, it's not a real big saucer. It's maybe 20 feet across, disc. But what's really kind of unusual compared to most saucers you hear about or see about, are you familiar with those, what do they call it, Google Earth type cars that drive around that have that sort of a tower on top with the cameras that look in all directions? They drive around and they map the city. Well, this saucer had a Google Earth type tower on top. It looked like a mini Eiffel Tower built out of this thing, quite tall compared to the saucer width. Unusual. Hadn't seen anything before or heard since about it. And it was flying by quite low. I would say it was maybe at best 100 feet above us. And it did not have any curvature in its flight. Everything it did was linear tight. Like that. It was very, just very angular tight. I think it was on some type of, mapping mission. But the most strange thing about it was that it had a time dilation or a time distortion field with it. Because as it was right by us, everything was in ultra slow motion as far as physicalness, but perception was fast. I don't know how to say it. I don't really understand it. All I know is that time was screwy when it was nearby, and as it got a little further away, and time went to another flow rate. So it was like it was traveling with some type of time distortion field with it. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting kick in the head. Oh, let's see now. I've just got through 84, 86. No. Oh, yes. I was visiting my friend PJ, and then it was time to go, so I left. And I was heading up her driveway up to the street. And she lives on sort of a strong slope there. And as just I'm walking up the driveway, I hear this voice in my head say, "Look up." So I look up, and there's a flying saucer, about 500 feet up if that, flying over. And I can see it making its plasma cloud, where I can see this puff in front of it, an arcing puff. And then it overtakes that puff, or I should say the puff overtakes it, depending how you want to look at these things. So I was saying puff, 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 as it went away. So again, that was the second time I had seen for my own one of the plasma cloud generation things. What they do, if you go to YouTube and you can look at my UFO lecture. And in there I give technical aspects of how you fly in flying saucers and stuff. And I discuss how they can make plasma clouds, how they put out tremendously intense, short-lived bursts of microwaves around 3 gigahertz. 3,000 megahertz, 3,000. Anyway, if you put out that really intense microwave at that frequency, you ionize the atmosphere to about 10% in front of the ship. You make a plasma cloud. Now that you have a plasma cloud, you can then grab onto it and manipulate it with magnetic fields. In other words, you can grab the plasma and pull your ship forward and pull the plasma forward in a reaction and use it for propulsion. So you go pulse, 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 pulse. And so commonly when they're really flying around, they'll be making 300, 600, 1,000 of these pulses per second. And they're really hauling so fast you don't even know they're here because you can't track them that fast. Your eyes are too slow. They're here, they're gone before you even have any sense of it. But anyway, I got to see one. That was nice. Oh yeah. PJ and I were heading up to San Francisco area, I think to some college reunion thing. And it was late at night, probably around 10:30-ish, maybe 11, 12, pick a number you like. And we're traveling down the highway on Route 5, and you make good speed, and it's a nice straight route. And this thing comes flying off the side of the highway, parallel to us, doing about maybe twice our speed, let's say, maybe doing 120, 140, who knows. And it's not very far out. It may be, maybe as far as a quarter of a mile, but I don't think that far, but something between an eighth and a quarter of a mile out. And it's really weird. It's as big as a school bus, and it's got a nice red glowing nose and a nice lit up blue-white rear end, Isn't that odd? And it's, it's percolating along, so I'm looking at it, I says, okay, that's one of them again. What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Anyway, they keep edging ahead of us and heading out ahead, and they get a good distance out ahead of us, and then they make a right angle turn. And they're not very far off the ground. I mean, they may be only maybe 100 feet. They're on the deck, traveling fast. They make a right angle turn, and they cross the road in front of us before we can get there, and then they make the steep climb up this hill that's right off the road. There's valley out here and foothills here. And they just do a real steep climb right up over this first foothill. And then they stop. They rotate, turn on really bright lights, and just kind of hover out of sight behind the hill. PJ and I thought, well, looks like there's about to be a cattle mutilation. Who knows? We didn't go back. We didn't climb over. It's just one of those mysteries of life. Now, I've seen a lot of other stuff, but they're almost insignificant. They're just like, oh, I know what they are, but they're, what are you going to do? Like you look up in the sky and suddenly you see a hole going through a cloud. Something just took a hole out of a cloud, and then after a while the hole seals in again. Well, I know what it was. It was a UFO flying at high speed, and its field distorted and took out that section of cloud. Okay, big deal. Or you're out traveling at night, and I remember one night I was having a particular set of thoughts, and I've perceived, let me digress for a second. I was talking about that wilderness overlook place up on Route 2. Well, in the summertime, I'd like to go out camping, so I'd go up there and park my vehicle, and I'd hike in the mountains. It's really kind of neat, frankly. It's nice and quiet, no traffic, And you can get a lot of thinking done if you want to just go out and hike down highways and whatnot and think, which I like to do. Well, I found an interesting thing would happen. What I usually do is I pick a problem or problems I want to work on, and I nibble at them. And so I find that when I find the solution that's right, I would hear a popping sound in the sky. You know, just imagine a blanket, somebody taking a blanket and popping it. That's what I'd hear in the sky above me. It's like, yeah, you got it. You know, as though I was being monitored. I mean, I didn't see anything. All I just hear is these popping noises in the sky. And it kind of, okay, you're with me, I guess. Well, I'm going to have to stop here for a bit, and we'll go on our break. But I want to go more down this line about other influences and things that happen where they're not so obvious. And should we call a break here? Yeah. Thank you.
How many people want to follow Guerry around for the next 5 years? I think you'll have at least 3 sightings. It'll be good. Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Make sure you visit all the vendors, get a drink over here, and I'll be around with raffle tickets if you'd like to buy additional ones. Thank you very much. We'll start up again at 9:20.